It all started when Pedro arrived, the new gravedigger of a cemetery in Madrid. The previous one had disappeared 2 days prior. Nobody knew where he was, since he left no clue about his whereabouts. And although an investigation was currently being carried out, he needed to be replaced quickly. As soon as Pedro arrived, he was faced with a huge amount of graves to dig. The cemetery was 48 hours late, since they were lacking staff. That was Pedro's first job, so he assumed the work in front of him with resolve. He really wanted to start earning some money. A few days later, he realized that an elderly man was observing him while he worked. Pedro simply ignored him and continued. He thought that maybe that old man was just walking around the place since he had nothing better to do. However, as time passed, Pedro had finished 4 graves, but that elder was still behind him. Uncomfortable, Pedro turned around and asked the elder if he needed something. And then, the elder started crying. He said that he knew his time on Earth was running out and wanted to see the graves before passing away. One of those graves would be his. Pedro felt compassion towards that poor man, so he told him he would dig him a very special grave and promised to make sure it wouldn't be used for anybody else. Thankful, the elder asked Pedro to please dig his grave as far away from the other ones as possible so he could rest in peace. The elder said he had a place in mind and guided Pedro towards it. And so, Pedro started digging a grave there as the elder kept observing him. The elder wouldn't stop crying, although Pedro didn't mind at first. However, once the hole really took the shape of a grave, the elder's wailing became so loud he sounded like a baby in pain. It was very unpleasant. After a long while, the elder asked Pedro to lend him his shovel. He said he felt he needed to be the one to dig out the last bits of soil from the grave. His physique looked pretty weak, but Pedro had been working pretty hard over the last few days, so he thought he deserved a little bit of rest. Pedro got out of the grave to find a place to sit, but then he heard the elder scream. He rushed to the grave to see what happened, and the elder had found a decomposing corpse. And according to what the staff at the cemetery said, the corpse looked exactly like the previous gravedigger. Then, quite suddenly, the elder's tears dried up and were replaced by a sinister smile. The old man grabbed the shovel, hit Pedro on the back of his head, and threw him into the hole. Pedro could see from the bottom how soil was falling on him, just before closing his eyes and finally dying. This same horrible event has taken place in many more cemeteries throughout the country. Only they managed to see that elder without knowing that his presence was a sign of their premature death. Who or what is that old man?
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more horror videos, subscribe to our channel.